Mai ka pi'ina kala I ha'e ai ka mole olu hua I Kanaeokana loa. Aloha mai kako and welcome to Kanaeokana Talks. For kumu by kumu. Today, we will be talking about pedagogy of aloha, how to teach with online aloha. This presentation is brought to you by my mama, Kahakalau. O wau no o polani makamai Kahakalau, ke kia ku a mena lei Kahakalau. O waipi o ku'u awāwa o mauna kia ku'u mauna, o hi'ilawe ku'u ka Hawai, o hilo ku'u one hanau. Aloha! Before we get started with today's presentation, we will open with our opening protocol, Aloha e ie. Aloha e ie. Aloha e na akua. Aloha e na aumakua. Aloha e na io Hawai. Aloha e na kūpuna. Aloha e na makua. Aloha e ka lehulehu. Aloha e ie. Mahalo.
Aloha mai kākou, o wau o kū hina kui kahakai, ke kia lopaka Kahakalau, ke kia Williama kia honui Kahakalau, ke kia Daniela ke kino Kahakalau, a me kia au o pupele. A o ki ia ku'u ohana. Aloha mai kākou.
Aloha mai, and mahalo for joining us for our first session of Pedagogy of Aloha online, which focuses on how to build relations online. We have with us today, as I mentioned before, my mama, Kahakalau. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what have you been involved in these days?
Well, I was born on Oahu, but we have resided on Hawaii Island since 1991. I've been an educator of Hawaiian language, culture, and tradition since 1985, and I really enjoy working with Hawaiians of all ages because there's so much potential for our people to thrive through education, and particularly through education that's grounded in the ways of our kūpuna, which we call pedagogy of aloha in Hawaii.
You talked earlier about pedagogy of aloha. How did this pedagogy of aloha emerge?
Well, it's been a few years. We started in the 80s. As I said, I started teaching Hawaiian language in the DOE. And by the 90s, I felt like, our students had so much potential and yet they weren't reaching their highest abilities. So many of them were underperforming. And so we started in 1991 to go down into Waipio Valley and to see if the ways of our kūpuna still work today. And then we started a school within a school in 1997, āina Hawaiian Academy at Honolulu High School. And in 2000, we transitioned to a school within a school. And we still didn't really know about pedagogy of aloha, even though we treated our students with aloha all these years. In 1996, I started my PhD in Indigenous education. And so I started to ask the students as part of my research, what was different between this form of education and what they had experienced previously. And the number one word that came through over and over was the word aloha. They said, this is the first school where teachers really care about me. This is the first school where I have a good relation with my teachers. I feel like I belong. I feel like I am loved. And that word aloha coming over and over. And so I actually changed my PhD from a pedagogy of liberation to a pedagogy of aloha because the students identified that the most important part of teaching and learning, in order for it to be successful for Hawaiians, has to be aloha.
Prior to COVID, pedagogy of aloha was used in face-to-face student-teacher interaction. How can teachers who know how to establish strong relations in the classroom grow strong relations in an online environment? In other words, what are some tools we can use in an online environment to build relations with our students and with others?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the important part is that we understand how pedagogy of Aloha or education with Aloha or AIA works. It's basically relations first, and then relevance, then responsibility. And if we do those three in that order, we will end up with rigor and hopefully also have fun if we do it right. And so the idea with teaching for Aloha is, with Aloha, is really maintaining an atmosphere of Aloha at all times. Making sure that the learning takes place in a safe environment. That is something that's really, really important. Validating the student's self-worth wherever they are, and whenever we can do that, make them feel good about themselves. Help them to take care of themselves and learn how to care for themselves as well as others. Another thing that's really important is to plan fun learning opportunities with a meaningful impact, so that if they feel like you're doing something that is especially tailored to them, and that makes them feel good about themselves too. As much as possible, allow the students to be part of the planning for the project and the assessments. So they should be student driven and student led. Another thing is that as much as possible, if we can personalize our learning, we should know what each student's gifts and talents and strengths are, and then integrate these strengths into the way that they do their assignments, and especially into the way that they do their ho'ike. The other part is, obviously you want to integrate humor and fun whenever and wherever you can, because that's also a part of, you usually just joke around with the people that you like, right? You only tease the people that are dear to you. And so same thing, when you get it to that point where people joke around with each other and they tease each other, you know that there's aloha present. Because if we don't like somebody, we don't even give them the time of day. We wouldn't even joke with them. And then whenever possible, if we can bring their families in, if we can bring their communities in, if we bring the whole lahui in to the teaching process, that's also really, really important. So overall, I think student support has to be a #1 priority. Students have to feel that they're loved and they're supported. Now, you as a teacher can say, well, I love my students, but if they don't feel it, then it's almost not worth anything, right? So you have to make sure whatever you do, that your students feel that they know that they're loved and that they're supported. And, with transitioning, as you mentioned now, to online, there's a lot of unknowns, right? A lot of things that are risky, a lot of things that are a little scary. And so the more we introduce them to these new platforms in a way that feels safe for them, maybe doing a quick video on your phone saying, hey, it's the new semester. We're going to have some fun together here, I don't really know how this is going to work, and maybe you're not too sure either, but together we can figure it out. Making them feel like it's something that's personal to them, right? By sending them this video, and you can just do that with video message, whether it's a video or whether it's a graphics like tiny cards, or whether you're sending them a text. The main thing is that it's not just some boring instruction on a piece of paper. And with that, then also the students, by supporting them, they gain what we call self-confidence, self-perception, self-efficacy. And when we validate them in terms of their potential to learn, because the thing is, many of our Hawaiian students feel like they don't have the potential to learn. Maybe they haven't been getting good grades, right, from early on, but that doesn't mean that they're not smart. It just means that the way they're being taught, what they're being taught, and how they're being assessed doesn't match with who they are. So it's really important that, first of all, we have faith in them, that we can say, you can do this. I believe you can do this, and I'll help you to get there, but I know you can do this. And when you challenge them like that, I think that's a really important part. And they also need to understand that they have a kuleana and that they're important to your class where you're teaching, to their ohana, to the community, the lahui, and even the aina, that every single individual has to contribute and make a positive impact on the aina. We also have to let them know that every single one of them is gifted and talented, right? So many times we think, because in Western education, it's only math, science, language arts, and maybe art if you're really, really lucky. If you're not good in those three things, then you don't think you're gifted and talented. Yet we know students that are gifted in riding horse, or that are gifted surfers, or that are gifted dancers, or that are gifted rappers, or that are gifted, there's so many things that gifts, and we have to find out what they are, and we have to support them in those gifts and make them feel good about those gifts, right? A lot of times, just because you're a good surfer, that's never acknowledged in school, right? But it should be, right? Because you're a great athlete is one thing. You understand waves, you know science, because a good surfer understands the whole science of the waves. And so that's all things that you need to celebrate with them and make them understand that they have inherited mana, right? As Hawaiians, for sure, they have mana that was inherited from their kūpuna, and they can draw on that mana, right? When they feel like, oh man, this is really hard, draw on that mana of your kūpuna. Invite them to empower themselves through that. And I think by understanding that they have kuleana, I think that's a really important part that we're going to talk about in the third series of this webinar. So what our dear Elemakua Samka'ai tells us is that really Hawaiian-focused education or pedagogy of Aloha is bringing out what is already within the students, right? So we don't have to even sow the seed and grow it and blah, blah. No, we just have to get that iki kūpuna, that mana, that inherent mana to come to the surface. And I really like that idea of bringing it out, and making them understand that it's already within them. Because our kūpuna say, lehu lehu a mano mano ka ikena a Hawaii, right? Great and numerous is the knowledge of Hawaiians. And so they need to understand that. The other thing I think when it comes to relation building that's really, really important is that we make sure that their attitude is positive, right? Because attitude is actually more important than aptitude in terms of them doing well in class. So it's not just that they're smart, but if they have the wrong attitude, it doesn't matter if they're smart. Conversely, if they may be not so good in one subject area or another, if they have a good attitude, then they can do anything they want to. And so the idea of, in order to make them feel positive about wanting to learn, it's really important that we build relations where they feel like ohana, right? Like where you and your students feel like you're one ohana, where you cultivate what we call a growth mindset. The idea of, hey, you're here, we want you to be here, then we want you to go here. We don't care if somebody else is over here and starts to move forward from there. You start where you're at, and then we want to see growth, no matter who the student are. And that really makes it more exciting and also more safe, because then they don't have to compete with anybody else. They can just grow at their own pace. But the idea is they have to understand that growing they must. The other thing is that we can, by providing them experiences that show the students that they can and will learn, I think is really important. You don't give them the hardest thing right up front. You give them stuff that kind of builds on the strengths and the ike that they already have, and then you slowly build it up. But they need to feel confident right from the beginning that they can learn, right? If you throw them curveball and already they strike out the first time they're on the bat, that's it, right? It's really hard then to try and change that throughout the school year or the semester. The other thing is, this is a time of change. And I think all of us are a little bit certainly skeptical or unsure of what the future holds, right? None of us can say how this is going to shake itself out, where we're going to be in the future. So it's really important for us to teach our students that it's okay to have some trepidations and a little bit of worries, but that they can overcome that. And the truth is, it takes the brain, when you look at neuroscience, the brain a lot less energy to complain about stuff than actually imagining the possibilities of change. So by you really working with them and having them understand the possibilities of change, you're actually making the brain work harder, which is wonderful, because that's how they're going to be learning. And the main thing is that while we're in this transition, that we support them extra hard, right? We always have to support our students, but now in this time of transition and change and uncertainty, it's even more important to show aloha and to show patience. And so in order for the next generation to live, to learn, and to thrive, which is what we all want, and have healthy, productive lives, we as the teachers, we have to live and we have to teach with aloha.
I've heard you mention in the past that we have many olelo no eau that validate education with aloha. Can you share some olelo no eau that talk about the importance of relations in education?
Yes. Before I do that, let me talk a little bit about some of the tools that we can use, and then I'll segue into the olelo no eau. So one of the things that is true is that just because you're a great classroom teacher doesn't necessarily make you a great online teacher. So it's not like, oh, I can do this. I've taught for 20 years. There is a change, and we have to adjust. And the things that I feel it requires is that, first of all, we have to know our area, our content, our domain. And we have to know it as it relates to Hawaii. So if we're teaching literature and we only know world but not Hawaii literature, that's not enough. If we're teaching science but we only know scientific phenomena that happen somewhere else but not in Hawaii, we have to add Hawaii. So first and foremost, we have to know about our content as how it relates to Hawaii. And then we also have to know how Hawaiians and most other locals learn best. We got to know how to live and teach with aloha. And then there are these tools and strategies, right? If we know those, then we're also going to have an easier time in an online environment. So when it comes to relations, it's not just about Kanaka, really. We have to cultivate relations with Kanaka, but also with aina and also with akua. Now with akua, that's kind of a little bit iffy if you're within the DOE system, but generally it's not one specific deity. We're not teaching religion. We're just teaching culture and spirituality from a Hawaiian perspective. And so some of the things that we can do to build these familiar relations is to use our values as collective behavioral expectations. So we have olelo no eau that talk about aloha ki kahi, or malame ko kuleana, kokua aku kokua mai. It's those kind of values that you want to provide to your students and that you have to live with too, right? It's not only the students have to act that way, it's for everybody, including the adults. And integrating traditional ways of learning, makahana kaike, right, by doing one learns. Especially now, we have to admit as teachers that we are not the sage on the stage anymore. That time has come and gone. We are now co-learners. We're the guide on the side, and it's perfectly okay for you to say, this is the first time I am doing Zoom, or this is the first time I'm using Quizlet, or this is the first time I'm doing Kahoot, or whatever it is. So just bear with me. We're all going to learn together. And if you show that kind of positive attitude, so will your students.
Yes, absolutely.
The other thing is that even though you're in a group, in an online environment, you can still do group learning and peer learning and include kūpuna, ohana, the aina in your learning. One of the things that we do that I feel really makes a difference is we call each other uncle and auntie rather than Dr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. So I think when you call somebody auntie instead of kumu, there's a familiar relation there. And it shows that it's a person who cares very much, to the point where they're going to scold you if you don't do what you're supposed to do, which sometimes, that also shows caring, as long as you do it with aloha, obviously. So it's really important that we create, as I said earlier, these sets of behavioral expectations for teachers and staff, for parents and caregivers, and for anybody that's part of the educational process. And then we have to live by those. As I mentioned, the relations is not just among the students, but the students also have to get to know you. And then obviously you have to get to know them. They also have to get to know one another, and you should also get to know not just your students, but also their families. And so, for example, those of you who are familiar with Slack, that is a really good platform to do group projects in, because each little group can have their own kind of group where they can have discussions running, and they can work with each other, they can share documents, etc. They can make links, Zoom links. They set up communication however they want to, on the phone or over Zoom, however they want to communicate. And so that's a really important part in an online environment as well, that you spend time to get to know your students. The other thing is, we have opportunities now also for older siblings and younger siblings to work together because they're at home now. Before that, they were in different grade levels and they really never did any learning together. But now you can give them assignments where they have to find a younger or an older person, whether it's older sibling, older brother or cousin or whoever, and either read to them or do a project with them, or things like that, where you automatically include an intergenerational or at least a multi-age approach. Ana and Kaina have always taken care of one another, the older one really being responsible and the younger one there to learn. And so that's a wonderful relationship that you can continue to develop in an online environment now. As I mentioned, you as a teacher need to be a co-learner and feel safe. And so a couple of ways that you can make sure that we are building relations is through the idea of knowing about each other's place and origins. If I know where you come from, if I know your genealogy, if I know your history, if I know how you fit into something that happened down the road or on another island when you have some involvement in Hawaiian issues, or just knowing what do you like? Are you an ocean person or are you a mountain person? Do you rather sing your ho'ike or dance your ho'ike or paint your ho'ike, kind of thing. Those are all important things that we as teachers need to know. And so let's look at introductions. You did your introduction by sharing a little bit about who you were, and naming places that have shaped you. So when I hear Waipi'o Ku'uawawa, for example, automatically, bing, 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 all of these things come up because my valley is also Waipi'o. And so we have a connection there that is special, and then we can talk about also which one is your river in Waipi'o, which one is your waterfall of the many waterfalls, and then the more we know of each other's place and what it is that's dear to us and has shaped us, the more we get to know one another. Kilo, very important way of making relations with the environment, right? Kilo means stargazer or reader of omen, but really it's just somebody who's out there who is observing the environment all the time, right? Which is pretty much what our kūpuna did. They didn't have to be officially called a kilo. They could be a mahi'ai or a lawai'a or a mea he'enalu, right? Because all of those guys all observe the environment all the time. And so the idea of this is allow your students now, because they're going to be home, to engage with their environment, their yard, wherever outside of their house, wherever they live. They can go down to the park down the road, or just in the front yard or in the backyard or in the neighbor's yard if they have permission, just to go out there, spend half an hour a week, let's say, to kind of just watch. And first I would just tell them, just be quiet and watch, and then maybe the next time it would be observing the clouds, right? Next time it might be looking at the animals, or looking at the plants, or looking at the insects, whatever it is, each time focusing on a little bit something else, but really spending time quietly in the environment and doing this activity that we call kilo. That's a wonderful way to build relations with our students. Here's a kilo log example. This one is for loko'i'a, and it has the what happens to the fauna, what happens to the flora in this place. And so you can create different logs that really help your students to track what they are watching, what they're observing. And you can do those in Hawaiian or in English, depending. The other part is their mo'oku auhau. You know, they should really know their mo'oku auhau, which is why I started with a mo'oku auhau today. By me sharing that, maybe you guys know somebody by a similar name. You know, maybe you've heard, you know, a ohana name here or there, or you're going like, oh, I know somebody by that name, even if it's not relation to you. So it's really important for our students to know their mo'oku auhau, and these are the kind of templates that you can use for them to be able to say their mo'oku auhau. Another thing are personal stories. You know, allow you, because a lot of times we forget that the teachers need to share their stories with their haumana. Where are you from? You know, what is it that you like to do? Why are you teaching what you're teaching? You know, was that an accident, or have you always had a passion for whatever it is, kind of thing, right? Current events. So I've been involved in the grassroots movement since the early 80s. And my students knew exactly where I was when I got arrested, or when we held signs, and when we protested this, or when we protected now, you know, Mauna Kea. It's important for them to see you as the teacher involved in these things, and know that, oh yeah, my kumu was there. Oh, my kumu said that was going to happen, and sure enough, it was on the news the next day, kind of thing. So it's that kind of thing, really, where they get to know you at a real personal level. And then the same goes, obviously, for you getting to know them. But I think a lot of times we don't share enough with our students. We think that there's something inappropriate or weird, you know, about sharing your personal stories. But that's really an important part about relation building, right? How can they know you if they don't know anything about you, right? They don't just like you because of your good looks. You know? That's most likely not the case, right? They're gonna like you because they can find some similarities with you. And then scolding with aloha. It was so cute. A young man, his distinction, his claim to fame was most suspended in intermediate school. No, elementary school, most suspended in elementary school. And he was running around the corner when we're not supposed to be running on campus, and ran right into my husband. And he goes, whoa, 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 Kaleo, where are you running so fast? You know you're not supposed to be running on campus. Ooh, I gotta go to Auntie Ku's office. And my husband goes, Auntie Ku's office, isn't that a bad thing, right? I'm the principal. You know, going to the principal is usually not a great thing. Yeah, you know, but it's okay because Auntie Ku, she scolds me with aloha, you know. And this is a, you know, first grader. He after getting suspended more than anybody else in the history of his elementary school, he was looking forward to getting scolding with aloha, because even if you scold them, they can feel your aloha. If you truly aloha them, they can feel that. And that's the kind of thing that we want to have in an online and in-person environment. So here are some really fun things that you can do to build relations when you are with your students online. I like this 1, 2, 3 quick check thing, where you talk about one thing that whatever, hardly anybody knows about you, right? Then the students put that in, you put that in, let's say into the chat, and then we go, oh, wow, no, I didn't know so-and-so, you know, whatever it is. Or you could just say, this is always within the class, either right at the beginning, so you can build relations, or at the end, so you can kind of do some summaries. But it's a really good tool for relation building. Or one thing you liked about the class, or you liked about the activity, you know, then that's how you get to know what it is that they do like. You can ask them things like one thing you didn't understand, or one thing you have accomplished that you're very proud of, right? We aren't usually asked those kind of questions. And maybe it's something small, like, you know, I grew some tomatoes this past summer. You know, they came out juicy and sweet, and everybody raved about my tomatoes. Well, there's something, you know, that I've accomplished that I can be very proud of. And so that is one way for the students to get to know one another, and you to get to know them, and they get to know you. So another thing, if you do 1, 2, 3, the 2 things would be what we should all know about you. You know, then you can say, well, everybody should know I love the beach and I love music, you know, something like that. All of those kind of things help, get more information from the students so that you know them better. Well, 2 things that surprise you, 2 things that show you connection to Hawaiian culture, right? And you can say, oh, well, we go hunting, and we go diving or whatever it is, right? You would never find out those things unless you ask questions like that. And it's a one-liner in the chat, right? Very little bit. You save your chats and you will be able to see what it is your students like. And then you can tailor your curriculum, which we're going to talk about next time, to these propensities, to those gifts and talents, to those things that they enjoy doing. Or here you go, 3 things they enjoy doing, 3 things they learned today. And the thing is, sometimes it's not what we wanted them to learn, but if they learn something, then that's still interesting, and it shows us the way they're thinking, right? 3 things they want to know more about. Those are important things too, because then we can tailor our curriculum accordingly. So I love this 1, 2, 3. Just ask them 1 thing or 2 things or 3 things within your Zoom meeting that with whatever it could be a whole bunch of things. Use the thumbs up and thumbs down as well on your Zoom, and to foster and to grow the connections with your webinar participants. It also helps to kind of infect the participants at an emotional level. So say who's scared, or who feels kind of uncomfortable about what's ahead, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it is. Who's looking forward to learning about XYZ, type of thing. And so that kind of using the thumbs up, thumbs down gives you a temperature check, but it also helps the students to feel safe and have fun as they're engaging in online education. According to research, the quality of the teacher is the single greatest determinant when it comes to positive learning outcomes. So it's really your kuleana as the teacher to teach with aloha, So it's not how many degrees you have, how much money you make, what's your IQ, what college you graduated from, how well you know your materials. All of those things are important, obviously, but according to research, it's the aloha. It's this personal relation that the student and teacher have, and that everybody within that educational environment has. That is the most important thing. And so it's really important that you as a teacher feel good about yourself too, right? And you look at yourself as a learner, and you're not afraid to use some technology now, which you really have no clue how to use. And every time you're sweating right before you start your webinar because you just don't know if this is really going to work. But if you have to show that self-efficacy, and you also have to then try to establish what we call the group efficacy, which is the whole group feeling good about themselves, right? And that doesn't come automatically. You got to work at that. You got to tell them, hey, that was great, right on. Oh, wow, I never expected everybody to do so well. It's that constant encouraging that grows that group efficacy where the whole group, your whole class feels good about learning. And that is all through positive relation building. Our kūpuna, as I mentioned earlier, already say lehu lehu a mano mano ka ikena a ka Hawaii. Our knowledge is infinite. The knowledge of our kūpuna is infinite. And so it's important for us to make sure that our students understand that they connect with us, and that they connect with the rest of the students, because according to, again, research, when teachers connect with the students become more motivated, right? They want to please you. It's like from little children, your own kids at home, to animals, right? The idea is we all want love. And if we see that this is what we're doing is going to result in aloha, then we're willing to do something, to get that aloha. And really, as teachers, it's our kuleana to infect our students at the emotional level, right? To hook them in to the things that we think are important, which is obviously always our subject area, but there could be so many other things that are important to us as well, as we create happy, fun, and safe learning environments. So now we get to your question about the importance of aloha. Kalamai, that was a little bit long-winded. We have so many beautiful olelo no eau that talk about the importance of aloha. This is definitely one of my favorites. Waola loko ike aloha. Can we say that together? Waola loko ike aloha. Loko, the insides live, ola, because of aloha, because of love. So love gives life within. Aloha causes things to grow, to flourish. And without aloha, things don't move forward. Ike aku, ike mai, kokua aku, kokua mai, pela ihola kanohona ohana. Let's say that together. Ike aku, ike mai, kokua aku, kokua mai, pela ihola kanohona ohana. You know, to recognize each other, to help each other, that's how Hawaiian families have always functioned, and that's how we as learning ohana should also function. Aloha kikahi kikahi. Hanaho? Aloha kikahi kikahi. Love one another, you know, all ages, across any kind of barriers, you know. If we put out that aloha, the reciprocal part is going to be that aloha will be returned to us. And here it is. Aloha mai no, aloha aku, o ka huhu ka mea e ola ole ai. Anaho? Aloha mai no, aloha aku, o ka huhu ka mea e ola ole ai. So when we love, and when love is given, then love should be returned. Au kūpuna nu, that we should not waste any time on being haput or huhu or nuha or whatever we want to call it, because there's absolutely no life in it. And so, you know, for our students to have issues with one another, just tell them you're wasting your time. Let's move on, and aloha kikahi kikahi. Our kupuna believed helei poina ole kikeiki. Hanaho? Helei poina ole kikeiki. So the idea is we look at children as a beloved lei, right? And when you have that beloved lei, you put it in a place of honor, right? You look at it, you smell it, you kind of, you know, take pictures nowadays. The idea that we really have to treat each one of our students as if they were this most precious lei that was gifted to us. And when you start thinking from that perspective, you'll be surprised where the students go. If you look at them that way, and if you treat them that way, they are able to grow, and they truly become that beloved lei. Our kupuna knew that we have to do things together, right? That's why relations are so important, because we're only going to move forward if we work together. Pupu kahi I holomua. Hanaho? Pupu kahi I holomua. United we progress.
Right now, many teachers are a bit overwhelmed by the challenges of teaching online. Are there any advantages or pulses to teaching online?
Actually, there's quite a few advantages of online education that we never really thought about too much. For example, in a traditional class, Western classroom, you know, students all sit one behind the other, and really what they're looking at is the back of the other guy's head, right? That doesn't build relations, right? Looking at somebody's back head all day long. Whereas when they're in a Zoom room, they see each other's faces. Face to face. And then that makes them more motivated and excited, because they can actually have discussions going back and forth with people looking at one another. It also provides them with a level of protection, because even though there is bullying happening occasionally, hopefully not in your classroom, it is a safer place. And I think students tend to go a little bit more out of their comfort zone in that online environment, because it's not so obvious than if you're face to face with other students. It also allows them to engage at a higher level, and as I said, take a little bit more risks. They're also more willing to share ideas and engage with others. And because you're not physically in the same space, you feel more protected, right? The other thing is that they also become more aware of their own body language, their facial expressions, and how to speak and what they actually look like in an online environment. And like, as I'm looking at myself right now, I'm like, OMG, I should have whatever wore something different, brushed my hair or whatever it is. But there is that part that we become more aware of how we communicate, and that in turn then enhances our self-awareness, but it also changes the group dynamics. And if it's leveraged well by the instructor, you can actually significantly advance group learning in an online environment. So, definitely we are in a time of change and uncertainty. But I would say, rather than just trying to manage that, I think we should embrace it and actually celebrate it and make the students understand changes have always happened and they will continue to happen. And what's happening now will definitely impact our future. But that this is not a challenge in terms of woe to me kind of a thing, but really an opportunity. And that we can bring about positive change, right? If we work together and if we pupukahi, right? If we pool our strengths. And so when you look at our today's students, they grew up as technologically savvy learners from like 2-3 years old already. They were able, they use their phone, whatever, from young on. So they already are way ahead actually of us, most of us adults. And so tell them, hey, you already know how to use a phone, you already know how to use a computer, you already know how to text, you already know how to whatever it is. Can you make videos, you can make audio files, you know how to post all of that because you're posting all over the place, so they know all of these things. So if you know all of that, then this online teaching and learning shouldn't be no problem for you at all. Because if anything, you now have the advantage over us, the teachers, because many of us are just learning this for the first time. So show them that they are well prepared. When it comes to online education, our students are well prepared. If anything, we're going to be the ones who are hiccuping every so often and have to, as I said, put ourselves in those learner shoes too and say, okay, we're going to learn together, and there may be a lot of things that you can teach me. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't always have to be, that the teacher teaches the students. The students can teach a teacher as well. And that's our kūpuna understood that so well, because they say a'o aku, a'o mai. But the process is really the same thing. We're exchanging education. I mean, we're exchanging information, and it doesn't matter if it goes towards or away from the speaker. That a'o aku, a'o mai learning happens in both cases.
Mahalo nui for sharing, Mama. How can people find out more about your pedagogy or research methodology?
So if you go to our website, www.kuakanaka.com, there are all kinds of resources, papers that I wrote in the past on pedagogy of Aloha, also some videos, etc. And then if you want to know specifically, if you have a specific question or if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, you can always email me at kuakanaka.com. We also have on our webpage some of the services and products that we offer, and you can look at that as well.
Our next webinar is how to design relevant Hawaii-centered curricular for online teaching. Mahalo nui for joining us. We will be doing our closing chant at this time. Mahalo e ie, mahalo e ka lehu lehu,
mahalo e nā makua, mahalo e nā kūpuna, mahalo e nā li'i o Hawai, mahalo e nā o makua, mahalo e nā akua, mahalo e ie.
Mahalo.